Welcome to Chapter 1 from the Mertler text. Today we're going to be going over the introduction to action research. Now, we spent some time during the last video talking about basic differences between qualitative and quantitative forms of research. And if you'll remember, one of the things I said was that qualitative research is sufficiently broad so as to be able to encompass quantitative research as well. There are lots of researchers that refer to this as a mixed methods approach. Basically, when you are conducting any kind of research study, you're going to want to collect the kinds of data that you need to so that your study, you'll have the results. So you'll be able to measure what you need to measure. So that I want to make sure that that is sort of at the heart of the way you're perceiving action research. So let's go ahead and get started in Chapter 1. So, as an introduction, why something like action research? Well, there's some very good points that Mertler brings up, and I hope you're liking the text. I do like this text. It's something that's very user-friendly. It's got a lot of really good online resources. So, anyway, but on to the content. Classroom teachers are most likely the consumers of research. Now, sometimes this happens because of their own experience. They're the ones that go and collect the data and go and make the decisions. Sometimes that happens at policy levels above them, but it is very seldom, if ever, done arbitrarily. Someone is collecting data, performing a study someplace that is saying this particular way is the best way to go. Research is a means of seeking seeking answers to questions that you have. One of the things that can be good in the classroom is that you are intuitive about what you do, and that can be good. It can also be bad, which takes us down to the next 2 points about familiar sources of information. They tend to not be the most reliable. Now, that is not to say that they don't go and work for the teacher that is using them in their English class or their math class. If they have always taught 8th grade or if they have always taught 4th grade, these are things that they have seen work very well. The problem comes in because the curriculum may change. Students change from one year to the next. The teacher's pedagogy also changes as time goes by. So if you're looking for instructional improvement and you want to gather solid kinds of information to help you make a certain decision as to, continue or discontinue a certain practice, you're going to want to go beyond tradition, beyond the authority of, let's say maybe it's your department head, maybe it's your principal saying, well, this is how we've always done it, this will always work. You want to have a structured form of inquiry, okay? And you really need information that is valid and reliable. Otherwise, you're just kind of shooting from the hip, and that's not good for anyone. So going and looking at this kind of research, in a way, it is going and taking the scientific method and applying it to an educational setting. Now, you'll remember from science methods classes and science, when you were in high school, you have these 5 different parts to the scientific method. What you're doing with educational research is you are applying that to an educational setting. So they're very similar. It's just that the dimensions of the question that you're asking can be different. The hypothesis that you go into it with can be different. Also, the forms of data that you collect and that you analyze can be different. Okay, so going and looking at just a generalized process of educational research, you have these 6 main points here. You're going, and this will take place as you go and do your action research project for this course. You want to go and specify the particular topic that you're wanting to investigate. If it is something that is classroom based, if it is your teaching or your classroom management, something like that, just be specific about what you want to look at. If it's something that is more organizational in nature, it's a policy that the school uses to operate by, be specific in what you want to look at. Clarify the specific problem on which the research will focus. Now, what you have to be able to do is specifically state, this is what I want to look at. Now, with a lot of with a lot of graduate students, it's not just in conducting action research, it's also in doing your culminating research as well. I hope my hands are in the screen all right. This is where you start out with an idea. It tends to be very wide. What you're wanting to do is go and focus it in something, can you see my eyeball, that you can go and look at, and so you're examining something very specific. Okay, now that's a challenge, and that's something that we will work through, certainly, but don't be surprised if when you first go to do a study, it tends to be almost too large. And when you hear me say things like, you're out here and you need to be narrowing it down, don't be frustrated by that. That's just a natural part of the process. Okay? So you'll formulate the research questions that will go and guide you. You'll determine the procedures warranted to collect the kinds of data that you need. For this research study, that would involve at least an interview and at least an observation. Now, if there are other forms of data that you need, maybe it's test scores, maybe it's surveys, that will depend on the nature of your question and what you're trying to answer. But at least an interview and an observation are necessary. Okay? You state the findings, results from your data analysis, and then you draw a conclusion that relates back to the original question that you had. So if this was a question that you were investigating based on teaching pedagogy, okay, and maybe was it effective? Let's say that was your question. So the data that you collect, the observations, the interviews, et cetera, ultimately would address, was that an effective way to approach teaching? Okay, so you have this sort of circular way that you go about this. Okay? Okay, so what are some reasons for action research besides just an awesome class that you get to do in the here and the now? Well, I don't think it's a surprise to anyone that people always want schools to improve. So mass media and public outcries, they're talking about students continually performing. The politicians say this. They're codified into the laws that are written. So from a certain perspective, we always have that pressure put on us, and it doesn't matter the particular level you're talking about. College is included in this as well. Students need to be able to improve. Okay, now if you have teacher-led, classroom-based action research, okay, if it is known that a specific kind of a practice works, you're going to want to be able to have that framed in such a way that, if I come up with this brand new kind of teaching or assessment approach to my students, you would want to know that I had vetted it properly, that I had, done my homework, and that I just didn't make it up as I went. That's another reason for action research. So when you're going and looking at the reasons for this, okay, the first bullet underneath action research is focused on solving a specific classroom or school problem, improving practice, or helping to make decisions at a local site. Now, most of the time, you have it where a teacher will utilize action research for their specific classroom. And if that is what you want to do for this project, I wholeheartedly encourage that. But if you find something else that you're interested in that goes outside those confines, I would also encourage you to pursue that. But we'll be talking more about that as the semester goes along. Okay, so again, with the overview, reflection, as we all know and research states, is very important. That comes into action research in terms of, what you're wanting to go and look at. You're examining your practices. How is it that you know that you're doing the right thing, or how is it that you know that you need to go and change a particular approach? So reflection is just kind of built in as a dimension of this kind of research process. So it's something to be truly engaged and appreciated. Okay, now here we have different models of action research that Mertler has in the text. Now, there are, as you go through and look at these particular models, there's a summarized view of what each one represents. Now there are lots of things that they have in common with one another. Okay, and so you may find one that you prefer over others. No, but what I would encourage you to do is take a look at all of them, because you have, well, the old adage in education, the most sincere form of flattery is to rip off someone's idea. It's kind of like that with these different action research models. So what I would encourage you to do now is you can go ahead and stop this and take a look at these different action research models. See what is there that you perhaps like, that you don't like, and take some notes on them so that as you come to develop your own project, you'll have some place to go. So go ahead and stop it now. Just hit pause, and then you can come back to it. Okay. Well, I hope you've taken just a few minutes to take a look at this. I tend to see these as significantly overlapping one another, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on each one. Mertler does a good job of bringing them into the text, because it's important for you to know how one person's work complements another. So you have Stringer's approach, Lewin's approach, Lewin or Lewin, kind of not sure how to pronounce that one. Calhoun's action research cycle, Bachman's action research spiral, Reel, Piggott-Irvine, say that 3 times fast, Hendrix's action research model, and then Mertler's. Now the thing that I want to draw your attention to as you go through all of these, and Stringer's is probably the best illustration of this. If you'll notice, it tends to be kind of circular in nature. So whenever you go and you look at any kind of research or approach to conducting research where this is concerned, don't look at it like it's a linear process. As you're going through, you'll always be able to see things that you start here, and when you get here, you think, okay, I didn't think of something I needed to. So you can go back and readjust the questions you're asking, the data that you're collecting, things like that. And that's the circular part of this. It's not something that necessarily just ends. It's the same thing here. Look at Calhoun's cycle. Look at Bachman's cycle. Okay, as you go through these processes, you basically go around. The structure of the approach is such that it's not linear. I mean, there's really no other way to put it besides that. Okay, if you go all the way to Mertler's model, you have planning, acting, developing, and reflecting. Okay, reflection being a very important part of this. After you have reflect, would that then somehow influence the next planning stage? Would a different planning stage influence the next stage of acting or developing, etc.? So that's just a recurring feature I would just draw your attention to. Okay, so as continuing with an overview, the importance of action research is that it does connect theory to practice. There's a word that every single teacher should know. It's called praxis, Praxis. This may be on a quiz, haven't decided yet. But that is where theory and practice merge within a specific setting, within a specific place for a specific group of students, or maybe even a specific teacher. Okay, the word to keep in the back of your mind. It comes from Paulo Freire and his book Pedagogy of the Oppressed, which is a good read. I would suggest it. The improvement of educational practice. We've talked about that. Teacher empowerment. Obviously, you want to be proactive and assertive in your field. You don't want to be strictly on the receiving end of things being dictated to you. So that's a part of this as well. And professional growth. We all can continually grow. The individual that says that things don't change, that's just a little cynical to me. I think that we're all changing. We're all either evolving or devolving in some small little step. So, an inquiry-based approach to your teaching just helps you along in this area. Okay, so the applications of action research. Okay, this goes back partly to what we had talked about before. You're identifying specific problems, or maybe just challenges. You don't necessarily have to label them as problems. They could just be different areas that you want to go and look at. There was a student I had a number of years ago that just wanted to be able to improve transitions from one part of her class to another. Another student wanted to go and take a look at the most effective way to improve hall passing times from one class to another. And that may seem kind of silly, but no school operates the same way as another school. And so, it represents something that is worth looking at. Pre-service teacher education, another one, another very important one. One of the things that frustrates young teachers when they come out into the schools is they've gone and learned a specific way to do things, but you don't. Well, what if that doesn't apply in the school that you're in? What if the school you have your first job in does not necessarily work the same way as the school you did your student teaching in? So if you have this mindset of conducting action research, of being systematic about gathering data and looking at it, that can help you along as a developing professional. In-service professional growth, I think that's a very natural feature of this. Now, one of the things with action research is it has to be sufficiently rigorous. Now, with this, that means that the data that you collect, they have to go and focus on what you need to focus on. If they don't, you're just collecting a bunch of ramblings, and you're going to be trying to piece something together and it'll look like a poorly written case study. So you need to be able to go and identify, this is what I need to know. This is who I need to get this data from. These are the kinds of questions that I need to ask. This is how often I need to go and collect this data. Okay? Make sure that you plan for this. This ensures the greatest sense of collecting data and of an accurate analysis and reporting of the results. Okay? Determination of rigor often depends on the intended audience for sharing results, meaning it'll be different for elementary school, early elementary, as opposed to senior high. So, that'll just be something to be sensitive to. Okay. Now, talking about, again, rigor in action research, you're talking about a broader dissemination. Now, something I want to draw your attention to here is that in talking about a broader dissemination, and look at this, I cannot believe this happened. Witness me fixing it. A misspelling. Oh, anyway, and now all the little red squigglies. What I want you to think about is when we had talked about qualitative research being time and context bound. There's nothing wrong with going and disseminating the results of an action research project to a larger audience. You should not expect that they will readily apply to everything or to every person in the new place that they are disseminated to. But it may give the educator something to think about, something that they, some element that they hadn't considered before. So, even though action research is time and context bound and it's set within a specific context, there are still very good reasons for disseminating it. Okay? So, what are some methods for providing rigor to the process? They're listed here. Repetition of the cycle. The more you go and look at something, the more you can refine your process for collecting data. Prolonged engagement, meaning you're there. You don't just, if you're wanting to observe a class, you dedicate time to being there. You're not just in there for 10 minutes and then you perform some sort of a judgment. You have experience with the process, experience with collecting data, with analyzing it, membership categorization, a word we'll get to later on. Experience with the process cannot be, underemphasized. Okay? Triangulation of data. Now, triangulation means that you take one source of information along with another source, and you triangulate it. You see what each one has to say about the other. That's something that it may be energy intensive as you first begin to do it, but as you develop to being a better researcher, you begin to see how good this is, why it's such a good idea. member checking, participant debriefing. We'll go over these later on in the semester. Your text goes over them as well, but they're important because the people that you were collecting data from, that you would disseminate these results from, it's always good to go and ask them, to further communicate with them, to make sure that what you got was what they meant. Now, this covers chapter 1. This is considerably shorter than the first lecture was, but be sure to take a look at the book. The module directions are listed for Module 2 in OnCourse. Be sure to go and follow them. You have some assignments that are due. I will have another short video regarding assignments that I'm going to need you to watch, but this covers the primary lecture for chapter 1. So have a good day, and we will talk again soon.